area. And Edgewood Peace and Justice Team, all co-sponsored by this. The SDGs as a compass with Terry Wayne. So we can all welcome Terry to the podium, and can't wait. So.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you all for coming out tonight, and you could be doing something a lot more fun than what's going to happen here. But I'm hoping that what follows represents 75 years of trying to make sense of the world and my place in it. It's not like I have any answers. I have more questions than answers. I'm trying to make a coherent whole from an array of different disciplines, experiences, notions that I have about the world today and how we fit in it. I admit that I'm an expert in nothing, or maybe it's anything, maybe there's something, I don't know. But if I trigger within you tonight some fresh thoughts or reconsiderations for you to reflect on that are useful to you, I will consider it a success. And I'll bet good money the best part of this experience together will be the Q&A. So my object is to present some ideas in some sense, hopefully a coherent whole that makes sense, but maybe it doesn't. And so the Q&A, because obviously I'm distilling a whole lot of stuff into 40 minutes maybe. So we'll see how that goes. But I wrote a couple things else that I wanted to say in there, but put my glasses on. Oh, yes. So my undergraduate major was in geography, which I came to late in my undergraduate studies. And the thing about geography that I learned that I didn't know when I went into it, it is really ultimately about relationships. Relationships between the land and humans, between the biology and humans and other biology and the land. It's about the politics, it's about the culture, it's about relationships, and it's relationships that give us meaning. Without relationships, we probably wouldn't be in the room together tonight. Various people know each other and others don't know each other, but maybe before the night's over, we will. And last other intro piece that I want to put into this before I spiel on through this is that words matter. And I have some concerns about what should actually tumble out of my mouth as opposed to what I have planned to say. But hopefully, whatever does tumble out of my mouth will inspire some positive reflections in that. So here we go. Let's see if this is going to work for us. First of all, recognize that we stand on land that's been confiscated from people who were here before us. And I also want to make sure that we understand, I want to both appreciate all those who came before me, and including all the people whose shoulders I stand on, which is my family, first of all, of course, but friends, authors that I've read, musical experiences that I've experienced, communing in various places in nature, all of those make up who we are at any particular type of moment. I wouldn't be who I am, I wouldn't be here now without all of that. So they're not responsible for any of the errors, any of those folks. Yeah. So let's start with former Secretary General. The challenge of our age are not problems without passports. The challenge of our age are problems without passports, and to address them, we need blueprints without borders. United Nations is meeting right now with the Conference of the Parties dealing with climate change, for example. This comes from a book I read just a few years ago by a moral philosopher, Kathleen Dean Moore. To take what we need to support our profligate lives and leave a ransacked and destabilized world for our grandchildren is not worthy of us as moral beings. Right after 9/11, in September 2001, Nobel laureates were holding a kind of birthday party for the Nobel Prize in Stockholm, and they had a gathering of those that were there put together this statement in response to that example. The most profound danger to world peace in the coming years will not stem from the irrational acts of states or individuals, but from the legitimate demands of the world's dispossessed. Of these poor and disenfranchised, the majority live a marginal existence in equatorial climates. global warming, not of their making, but originating with the wealthy few, will affect their fragile ecologies most. Their situation will be desperate and manifestly unjust. This is only 2 weeks old. This is from the World Meteorological Organization, who put out the greenhouse gas bulletin with the number from 2023 that they now said is 423 parts per million in the greenhouse gases. You'll see that slope. I want you to see it. You're gonna see a bunch of graphs here. You don't have to memorize the details. That's not what about, but look at the slopes. The slopes tell us a lot. So here's another one. This is really often referred to as the hockey stick. It goes back to 1000 on the far end here, you can see, and then it goes whoop, and you'll see the top of the scale is 425. We're just now right up there as of October or as of 2023. And the new numbers that are coming out for 2024, a report just in the last couple of days, says we're definitely going to exceed last year in terms of that.
What are the parameters?
Pardon?
What are the parameters? Parameters on your graph?
Oh, on the graph, oh, let me go back, I'm sorry, Frank. So on this side is parts per million of carbon dioxide. And on this side are years, so from 1000 AD through 2000 and into 2020 on the far right side of that.
So that's atmospheric, right?
Yes,
It's not including what's in the ground.
no, that's what's up in the atmosphere, right. This, again, breaks it down a little bit more. You'll see here how much we've been adding per year in this graph. So you'll see that in 1990, we were down there. 1990 is a key year because that's the year from which you started basing what we should be doing to try to get to 350 parts per million. And you'll see that we're continuing to go up. We went up to 57.1 in 2023. It looks like it's going to go up 0.8% more this year from something I just read in the Guardian today. So these numbers are all continuing to go in this direction, even though, you know, in 2015 with the Paris Agreement, we all agreed, the nations of the world agreed that we were going to start cutting that back because we needed, if we're going to hit the 1.5 degree maximum temperature increase, we're going to have to make some dramatic cuts that you're going to see in a minute. So this basically shows temperatures. Now, we're not talking about CO2, this is temperatures, and you'll see the graphs here are again fairly dramatic from what it was in 1880 and through. The Industrial Revolution obviously had an impact. Remember, there's a lag time from when CO2 gases go up into the atmosphere before when they actually show up in temperatures. So we haven't seen the worst of what's coming, of course, as this slide suggests. So this one's a little more confusing. I'm almost done with these. You don't have to memorize the graphs. So these kind of show, this is 2025 right there. So this is showing if the Paris agreements, if the nation states stuck with the pledges that they would make, okay? There's two different levels here. To keep us at 2.6 degrees centigrade, that's unconditional. Unconditional is all those pledges that the countries made. The conditional are those that they could make if the wealthy states gave the poor states the money they said they would give. So we're probably, we're not going to be here. We're closer to this, and actually the numbers are still going up. And we need to get down here by 2030. And if we want to keep the 1.5, that's what they're telling us. So it looks pretty bleak that there's any way that we're going to get there. But I think this is going to be the last climate graph I show you. And to me, this is the most important part that people that even roughly follow the science don't understand. This is a graph from, I think, the 2005 IPCC report. So it's right way back there. See at the beginning, that's 2000 right here. 1990 was right there again. The original agreements to look at this stuff. The dark gray range of areas is the range of about 1,000 different climate models. The majority of them are in the light gray, which you'll see they listed some specific ones here to give you an idea. If you read the whole technical report, you could see what each one of those was projecting. But what I have found from following this from all these years, and you can look at, we are now at that one graph a couple back said, we are at 1.2, And 1.2 would be about 2030. And we're already there. So we're way ahead of that because these models, and especially the IPCC reports, are consensus reports. So that while they're showing the extremes, the consensus that you hear about the projections is always much more moderate. And yet almost every report I've seen shows that it's more on this side, maybe even beyond that, because we don't entirely understand all the workings of the climate system. So it's enough to make us worry. Makes me worry. We're done with climate. Ooh, feels better already. This comes from a 2003 global study called the UN Millennial Ecosystem Assessment. Scientists from various fields all over the world, representing all the continents, came together to study what's the status of our ecosystems generally. And you don't have to know much to see that most of those arrows were showing it going down in 2003. They've done segments of this subsequently, but they have not done another holistic assessment of this since 2003 that I know of. But it's not just that we're dealing with climate. There's all these other elements of the natural world that are part and party of what we're dealing with. How many here are familiar with the ecological footprint model? There's so much arable land that we can use to grow and produce what we need to produce. And as of about 1980, we were using up billions of years of capital that we had been living on the interest, and now we're spending down the capital. The number that this report came out in 2007. So you'll see up there, the human family was living as if we had 1.5 planets. We don't have 1.5 planets. And those numbers, if you look at slopes, those other slopes would tell us that we're still going up and that we're going to continue to need more than that. And then throw in the other element of all this, it's a very unequal. And you can see this by the look at the footprint differences between the USA and Australia and Brazil and India down at the bottom. So there are some people that have to be brought up and other people that have to come down. This is part of all the negotiations in Paris. Those are the ones that are going on right now in Azerbaijan at the Conference of the Parties. So this takes us to what really got me thinking about doing this program. Anybody seen this graph before? Okay. Oh, good. This comes from a new area of science. In 2009, a paper put together by 29 highly renowned scientists in a lot of different fields, identified what they thought were 9 basic planetary systems that needed to operate for us to exist. And they started to measure how are those systems doing. And you can see here, this is the latest one that I could find, which I think is from this year. We're overextended. We're overextended the safe operating space here in most of them, 6 out of 9. There's a new science that's evolved around this. There's new journals that just focus on this concept of planetary boundaries. And you're going to hear more about it. Probably not on the front page of the Detroit Free Press or the Lansing State Journal, but if you attend to these things, you'll see, and in Q&A, we can go into a little more detail. I'm not a genius on this stuff. I know a little bit, not to be dangerous, but we don't have enough information yet on a couple of these. So that's why they're blank. And there's others that we were still within what they think is a safe operating level, but most of them are a little bit out of control.
Could you read some of those?
Sure. Yeah. And by the way, I'd be glad to share this whole presentation with anybody. Send me an email link at msu.edu. I'll send you the presentation. You can sell it on the internet. So going clockwise, climate change up there, fresh water, stratospheric ozone, atmospheric aerosol loading, which is basically air pollution, smoke, particulate matter, that kind of stuff. Ocean acidification, phosphorus and nitrogen, part of the biogeochemical flows. Novel entities. Novel entities are things like hazardous waste, plastic pollution. That's what that stuff is. Land use is just the change of the land, what we do to it as humans when we put in a highway as opposed to paved paradise. And then the biosphere integrity is really that E/MSY is extension, millions of species per year. So it's an extension and also a diversity element that they look at. Hopefully that helps a little bit. Thanks for the question. That was great. So again, it's not just the biophysical world. We have these other elements of justice that need to be addressed. And just a couple of slides that come out of Oxfam. Oxfam does a lot of studies on inequality globally, not as much internally, but you don't have to memorize them. I mean, here's one. The 22 richest men have more wealth than all the women in Africa. Is that a world we can live in? Is that a world we should live in? And with what's happened in our government recently, yeah, okay, we won't go there. Yet. The 5 richest men have more than doubled their wealth since 2020. You know, we're talking COVID now. So right after COVID hits, they made more. Well, 5 billion people actually got poor. We can't decouple these differences of concerns. And this just shows domestically what's going on. I was showing you international stuff before, but this is domestic. It's the same here as it is everywhere else. We could spend the whole rest of the night talking about inequality, but we won't. And then the very non-liberal World Bank even indicated that climate change itself is going to thrust another 100 million people into deep poverty, not just poverty, but deep poverty. So I want to show this little video. I'm gonna have to call my friend here. I'm gonna go back one. Oh, here it comes, maybe. What do you think? Okay, I have this switch. This is a 1:55 video. I found this accidentally after failing to translate the idea that I was trying to communicate to students. And I saw this prof do this and I thought, oh, yeah, this is it. So rather than try to do it, I show this little video. Yeah.
The greatest shortcoming of the human race is our inability to understand the exponential function.
Retired physics professor Al Bartlett has devoted his life to injecting rational, scientific discipline into our beliefs about population and economic growth.
If you have bacteria and they grow by doubling, and one bacterium divides to become 2, the 2 divided become 4, and the 4 become 8, 16, so on. Now that's steady growth, just ordinary growth. And if they double in number every minute, and if you have just one bacterium in a bottle, an empty bottle at 11 in the morning, and then if you observe that the bottle's full at 12 noon, then you've got a case of steady growth in a finite environment. And at what time was the bottle half full? And so you'll get answers like 11:30. No, this is steady growth. It doubles in number every minute. It'll be half full at 1 minute before 12. And the second question, if you were an average bacterium in that bottle, at what time would you first realize that you were running out of space? At 12 noon, the bottle's full. 1 minute before it's half full. 2 minutes before it's a quarter full, then an eighth and a 16th. Let me ask you, at 5 minutes before 12, when the bottle's only 3% full and is 97% open space, just yearning for development, how many of you would realize that there was a problem?
Next slide will be funny.
Okay, nice. Need to share it. We can get talking.
The reason I think this is so important is when I sometimes speak bravely and say there should be a climate emergency, because we really don't understand how quickly things can go when you're moving in this steady growth, and we continue to add this stuff up there. The scientists are giving us a guess in those models, but even they would admit that we really don't know for sure. And when they talk about in the IPC reports, they use very qualified language. When they say something is very likely, it means that it's got a 90% chance or better. If they use the word likely, it has a certain threshold, 66%, and not between 66. So, I mean, they're not just making this stuff up, is what I'm trying to say here. So, whoops, low system resources may affect the auto quality. Oh, hold on a second here. So this is one of the other elements that comes in here now, an idea perhaps that you have not been exposed to. The proposition is that in the long term, a contraction and transformation of the economy is inevitable. The question is how it will happen. Will it be the byproduct of a broader political project of social transformation that embraces the need to reduce throughput, improving the living conditions of the majority, or will it happen catastrophically through a series of disasters where few sustain their lifestyles at the expense of many others? The first would represent degrowth, or there's other words that are being used for it, or the second is disaster. Jeffrey Sachs, Michigan-born economist, assistant to the Secretary General, Columbia, started the Earth Research Institute at Columbia University, said at a meeting of the World Rotary Conference a couple of years ago, that if you show me your budget, I'll show you your values. And so I show you this graph. Wouldn't be part of Peace Education Center if I didn't share this graph with you. This shows, as of 2023, the amount of money that we are pouring into military that is not available for all the things that I just showed you that we need to deal with. And that represents more than the top 9 countries, including some of our biggest adversaries. And where the rest of the world is still soaking in a lot of money that could be reutilized. If we do not address militarism, I don't see how we'll get the resources to come back to be able to do what we need to do with the rest of this. So my friend Albert often said that insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. So what would a new look like? Bucky Fuller, the great architect designer, said, you never change things simply by fighting the existing reality. You do it by building a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. These are the kinds of things we have to keep percolating in our brains, especially in these days that we are facing coming at us, I think. So sustainable development emerged out of this is the pre-sustainable development model here, where we looked at the world as being 3 distinct parts. There was the economy, there was society, and there was the environment. And for the most part, you know, these graphs, even the sustainable development graphs, show these as 3 equal circles. But I would argue, in my lifetime, in this culture, the economy has always been the big guy. It's why we can't afford to do this, we can't afford to do this, we can't afford to do that. The economy owns the other 2. When sustainable development idea got legs in the late 1980s, this was the typical definition that I was raised under when I got into quote unquote sustainability. Meeting the needs of the present generation without prejudicing the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And so the idea was that there'd be this sweet spot in the middle. If you got them all balanced right, that would be sustainability, and that would be great. And the business world, a number of years later, took on and reframed this a little to the triple bottom line. And these in my mind are the early stages of the idea of sustainability, which is still emerging in my head. But I read a book just in the last 6 months that flipped me around a little bit. I didn't know this, even though I'm a student of sustainability for about 30 years now, I think. That if you read a little bit further in the report from which that definition existed, there's this phrase, the essential needs of the world's poor to which overriding priority should be given. Never appeared. Never saw it in any definition until a book that I recently read highlighted and wrote basically the entire book about it. And that professor was just speaking at MSU about a month ago. I heard him, he's a fabulous speaker. But we can't lose sight of this. So this is Terry's creation with the help of a designer. When I was editing an encyclopedia, I was an associate editor of Encyclopedia on Sustainability, and I got to write the piece that talked about how it all fit together. And this model, in my mind, still works as good as anything I've seen. In this one, the economy exists within society. If you didn't have a society, you wouldn't need an economy. The society decides what an economy is going to look like. But both of those are embedded subsidiaries of the environment. If the environment doesn't work, there is no society and you don't need this. I also added these circles because it's dynamic, it's not static. Things are moving through it all the time, just as molecules in our body are changing all the time. So this makes it an incredibly hairy, complex problem. Kind of funny for a guy with no hair to say hairy. It's true. And so I think this kind of thing is leading us on to better possibilities. So a number of years ago, I should know the year, it should be in my head. Kate Rayworth, a economist, a Great Britain economist, came up with the idea of the donut. So this is the donut. And you'll see on the outside, the planetary boundaries. So she took the planetary boundary model, she applied an academic model to it, which was, how do we create this, what she calls a safe and just space for humanity and an inclusive and sustainable economic development that provides all these for everybody and still lives within the planetary boundaries.
We can't see all those. Can you just give us a sampling?
Yeah, well, we read the outside before, so let me read the inside. The outside is the same as on the planetary boundary one. So you got climate change, freshwater use, nitrogen and phosphorus, ocean acidification, chemical pollution, atmospheric aerosol loading, ozone, biodiversity loss, and land use change. And on the inside, you have water, income, education, resilience, voice, jobs, energy, social equity, gender equality, health, food, and water. You're gonna see, go ahead.
So it says, how to create a safe and just space for humanity. And
Yeah.
what's the little thing that's underneath it?
It says inclusive and sustainable economic development. Okay. So go back and go on it again. The real borders are not between nations, but between the powerful and the powerless, the free and the fettered, the privileged and the humiliated. And the UN has been a home for growing the whole idea of sustainability since the 1980s, when those conferences first began to be bringing people together from across not just the politics, but the economics, from the agriculture, from the meteorological people. They brought them together in these things. And out of that has come the Sustainable Development Goals. In 2015, all 193 member nations of the United Nations agreed to these goals. These 17 goals have 169 targets, specific targets, that by 2030, each of those nation states is supposed to make those targets. And to measure whether they're doing that, there are 231 unique indicators. There are some indicators that are in more than one of these, but essentially you have that. And so it is a model that hopefully, and this is it's universities are starting to look at their footprint this way. Not all universities by a long shot. I'm not sure that MSU is doing much with this, to be honest with you. But some universities are, some businesses are, some organizations are, some cities are taking this on and saying, okay, if we got to fix poverty, but we can't make any of these other things worse. Is there things that we can do that can do several, move them in the right direction at the same time? And to do that, you need to bring people together who have expertise in all these areas. So it creates a different way of even making decisions. But there are some critiques of the SDGs. One of those is that just wrote no real direct mention of human rights in there, though it can be seen if you look through all the different indicators and targets, that you'll see what would be classified as human rights, but they don't stand it out as a particular thing. There's no expressive reference to justice. They don't mention planetary boundaries. There's no reference to the existing geopolitical economy that's driving everything. And there's no mention specifically of democracy or decision-making. Those could be piddly, but the thing is, they brought people together. We got them to agree. We got them to make commitments in terms of climate change. They haven't lived up to them for the most part, but it's still this possibility that exists that we want the UN to continue to do. It's still that forum where countries can come together to figure things out. Now, before I got into all that stuff, I became enamored with this called the Earth Charter. And I just want to read, this was done in 2003, actually 2000, and approved and by UNICEF in UNESCO in 2003. The preamble, I want to speak to real quick. I'll just read it because you can't read it from back there. We stand at a critical moment in Earth's history, a time when humanity must choose its future. As the world becomes increasingly interdependent and fragile, the future at once holds great peril and great promise. To move forward, we must recognize that in the midst of a magnificent diversity of cultures and life forms, we are one human family and one Earth community with a common destiny. We must join together to bring forth a sustainable global society founded on respect for nature, universal human rights, economic justice, and a culture of peace. Towards this end, it is imperative that we, the peoples of the earth, declare our responsibility to one another, to the greater community of life and to future generations. To me, this document, which actually has 16 principles, that I'll leave this up here, you can look at it later to do this. There's still work going on with it gets more to the soul of what we need to do than just the data that's in indicators and targets. And I think somehow these need to be linked better than they have been linked before. That's one guess. We're almost done, folks. So I always get in trouble on a campus like Michigan State University railing against competition, but here's my argument. Well, that's an argument, isn't it? I don't know. I have to cooperate with myself. So one approach to solving issues is to win every discussion and things, and that we've all been informed early on that, Darwin's idea, one of Darwin's ideas, but there's this competition, the survival of the fittest. Of course, other Darwinian ideas talked about all this cooperation that goes on in nature. And we're learning more and more and more and more and more and more in the science about the cooperation that goes on in nature, across species, across everything within the cells in our own body and how we react to things. But we've overcompensated in the competition. We built an economic system that has winners and losers specifically designed to do that way. And so that needs to be addressed. We bow down in front of competition, and it's embedded in our DNA in such a way in our culture that I think it's toxic. And I see this in the distinction which I make here between debate and dialogue. So you have two people running for office. Lynn John Doyle is going to run against Donald Trump. I hope to God you win this time. But we set up debates. League of Women Voters will set up debates between A and B, and they'll talk about this, and they'll try to have the better argument. But the idea is for one to win and one to lose, as opposed to if we invited them into the room and we said, make your interesting remarks about what you're really interested in or what you really believe we should do with X, Y, or Z, and then have the other person do the same, and then each other say, what is it that I really liked about what you said? And what could we do collectively better than either one of us have already done? That's the idea of emergence, creating conditions that allow things to emerge. And we need an awful lot of that. We don't know what it looks like right now in this present week, but I think we certainly need to set up these environments where we enable that kind of conversation to take place. I know it's probably hard to see that right now, at least if you read what I read today, but I'll let you finish with probably my favorite quote. I say all of this because hope is not like a lottery ticket you can sit on the sofa and clutch feeling lucky. I say this because hope is an axe you break down doors with in an emergency. Because hope should shove you out the door because it will take everything you have to steer the future away from endless war, from the annihilation of the earth's treasure, and the grinding down of the poor and the marginal. Hope just means another world might be possible. It's not promised, it's not guaranteed. Hope calls for action. Action is impossible without hope. To hope is to give yourself to the future, and that commitment to the future makes the present inhabitable. From Rebecca Solnit, Hope in the Dark. That's my 2 cents. What do you think? No, a whole bunch I didn't say. Dr. Dennis, please.
Can you give us some example where the system has been used to solve problems on an actual problem?
I don't have an immediate one offhand. I can tell you the donut economics piece of that utilizes those kinds of frameworks is operating in some pretty big spaces. The city of Amsterdam is taking that on as a model of how they develop that city into the future. And these require that you bring people to the table and that you get to hear all the stories and all the voices and everybody gets a chance to weigh in. And there's more of that going on, not just there. There are other new economic approaches. There's fields of these. They're just growing up all over the place. If you look at the new world of economics, under either behavioral economics or there's an Austrian guy, Christian Felber, who does a book called Economy for the Common Good. That's designed in a certain way. He's got plenty of ideas. There's a lot of stuff burbling up out there that you didn't see. There's even some in the Lansing area that's starting to grow up amongst the number of people that are trying to do some things. So a real hard, fast example, no, I don't, I can point you to some things, especially with what I see from the donut economics folks over mostly in Europe at this point. Yes, please.
When you talked about boundaries and, where are we in reference to a lot of them? It sounds a lot like some of John Attenborough's work. There was one program in particular where he looked at, I think it was 9 or 12 boundaries and which of them have reached the tipping point.
Yeah, I think Attenborough was way up on the front of that. I don't know if he was one of the ones in the original science paper that had been reviewed, peer reviewed and all that kind of stuff that started this thing, but yes, and I've seen a couple of those shows on PBS.
Yeah.
Over time. Yeah, but so people are always doing groundwork before something erupts and you
Yeah.
actually see it, but we usually don't see it until it's up to a certain level. And they've got this now up to another level with that, because they now have a whole series of scientists around the world doing this kind of research, publishing in these fields, under peer review. So that's a little questionable. I don't think you can say that kind of stuff. That's important. Yes,
Has any of the countries that entered the UN agreement to reduce the carbon footprint actually seen effects of reduction, or are we still in the talk phase?
they're due to put out reports in 2025. All the nation states are supposed to put out reports in 2025. Now, just like the university puts out reports, they're gonna put out the best report they possibly can, and they might fudge stuff. Universities, companies, nonprofit organizations, do that kind of thing, but at least they're supposed to put that out. They're in some areas, some countries have made some substantial reductions, especially with the amount of renewable energy that's they're doing, especially in Latin America. There's a number of countries in Latin America that I read that have specific ones off the top of my head. They won't come forward. Good question, though. Yes, Bob?
I'm just wondering, in our practice of property ownership and resource ownership, is that a real detriment to our trying to reach these goals?
Absolutely. You mean just the whole concept of property ownership?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because there's a distinction between what we hold in common and what we hold privately. And it's, let's go to the bigger issue. The bigger issue is, are we, and as they said in the Earth Charter, are we one human family, one community of life even? Do we understand that? Until we can move people to have that kind of an orientation, I think we'll be running in the competition world, trying to get our own. So yeah, to some extent, I would say yes, but that's just my opinion. Yes, Dwight.
You comment, to whatever extent feels appropriate for your conversation, the role of nuclear power. And I ask because I hear a lot of your conversation, you spoke about the impact of carbon. And one of the alternatives to a carbon future, as I understand it, is a nuclear power future. And I'm curious how you see that fitting with the sustainable development goal, also realizing that as people do get energy in one place, it might change the demand for something else in other places. It just seems very complex web, and would wonder if you might comment on that.
I agree, it's a very complex web. Again, one of the 7 planetary boundaries is the waste. So the waste issue would have to be calculated into that. Plus, the concept of multi-generational issues with that waste. If you're gonna treat future generations fairly based on what you're gonna do, it might be get to the point where you have no choice to do it, maybe, or the choice would be harder. But we have the ability with solar and other technologies. This is not just a technological issue. We in the developed world have to live lower down. Doesn't mean our lives are empty. I mean, if our lives are really about relationships, getting a faster speedboat or an extra room on our house or something like that isn't as important as the relationships we hold in our neighborhood. How great would it be for every woman in this room to feel like she could walk out on any street in this city and never be afraid they're being attacked? How much is that worth? That's not a technical solution. That's a cultural solution. And I think, so we got to take that into consideration, but it would have to be the nuclear power technology argument, especially for smaller nuclear. It's got to be considered. It should be considered. Based on what I know at the moment, if I was a county commissioner, I wouldn't be supporting it as my first option. But if we don't start dipping that curve pretty soon, one way or another, science tells us it's only going to be worse. I'll be gone probably, but some of you still be here.
Questions?
We done.
There's a whole bunch, and she said you could choose one, so how about choosing the last one there? That kind of summarizes all.
Okay, how will the word sustainability fit in light of the recent 4 CEO studies indicating sustainability has fallen below 4th priority on my list? The sustainability isn't a good word. That'd be it's a word that we've been shopping around for a long time. I don't know what the replacement word is, but it's a buzzword. It's sort of like you use the word capitalism or communism or socialism or something. It picks up a loaded baggage that gets in the way of conversation. So we have to find new ways of talking about that. So one of the hitbacks on the folks who are pushing degrowth. Degrowth is this concept of constant economic growth that you saw from a couple of the slides. Said we can't, the world can't handle that. So we got to degrow. And some other people agree with the argument, say, but we can't call it degrowth. Because if you look at item number 8 on the Sustainable Development Goals, it talks about specifically economic growth. It's one of the challenges within the Sustainable Development Goals, that it talks about economic growth. So I think the language has to change to match. The question here is whether or not where it's gonna go. We gotta find new language, and maybe it's about relationships. Maybe I don't know. Smarter people than me, we come into the world, we think about it. Oh, we got the answer right here.
That's right, yeah, that's my thing. I think we can still grow. I just think we need to shift the growth from buying products. We could still grow our service industry in repairing items that we have. So I don't think it's degrowth. I think it's just growing in another direction from product to service.
You're reducing consumption.
Yes.
You're absolutely right. So, and that's one of the arguments about the whole concept of growth. What are you growing? Let's talk about sustainability. What are we sustaining?
Yeah.
Those are legitimate questions that need to be answered. But yes, the caring kinds of things that comes from that old caring that we need. There's a lot of us that are getting a little older, are gonna need a little more care here. Okay, I guess.
Yeah.
Was there another question, Kevin? Where do you see the role of anchor institutions like colleges and schools these days? You have accomplished so much in, as you say, university. I think I know this person. I think the idea of anchor institutions, we had a failed experiment about 20 years ago trying to create something called the Capital Area Sustainable Business Forum. And the idea was that we would bring businesses together that really wanted to, be about the community. That the community was part of it. And now you see what are called people here familiar with social benefit corporations?
Yes.
Okay, so social benefit corporations, when you put your charter out why you're existing as an entity, it's obviously to be a business, but in this case, part of your business model is to serve the community. And so that changes the orientation. And so there's some of that goes on. It didn't work here in Central Michigan. We tried, I think, over 3 or 4, maybe 5 years, different players coming in, but we never had, quote unquote, an anchor institution. An anchor institution in a community is typically a school, a university, a government building, or a hospital. Those are the kinds of things that stay. They don't pick up and move somewhere else. So if they can support something, good example, down in Cleveland, there's something called the Evergreen Cooperatives. The Evergreen Cooperatives grew up on a rough side of Cleveland, and it was built by some thinkers out of something now called the Democracy Collaborative. And they got a couple of the big hospitals there and Cleveland State University initially to agree to have all their laundry done by a cooperative in a low neighborhood where they taught people skills and all that. From that, they developed a set of greenhouses so that the food could be produced there, and they have the consumers right there. The anchors could be the ones that hold it together, that other players could join in, but the anchors make it happen. And so looking to the anchor institutions, I think is brilliant. Universities are part of that. Michigan State, when it decides to buy something, really can play what they're doing. So can state government, so can the city of Lansing. So when they make a decision to buy intentionally to help, you think of it, I think it's 85% of the students at MSU come from the state of Michigan. So if they even focus their purchasing just on what's in Michigan, that is Michigan related, they go back to the families that they're bringing the students in for. So it's kind of a circular economy kind of thing. By the way, there's a talk tomorrow on circular economy across the street at the Union.
So some of the history around the Evergreen project was the study of arithmetic cooperatives and the Basque people of Spain.
Yes.
So you can't, it is my opinion, but you can't jump in the middle of that history and just look at what happened with the Evergreen Corporation without looking at how they studied a whole lot of history before that, which was the Basque people are indigenous. And we could do a whole lot learning from indigenous folk and collective impact models.
Absolutely. A lot of great ideas coming from around the world from indigenous people. Going back to the Mondrian folks, that's yeah, it's the largest. They have 55,000 co-owners, and I don't know how many businesses they run out of that. The numbers escape me, but I mean it's phenomenal control. Another example of that kind of approach just escaped me. Where did it go? Was it cooperatives? The idea of participatory budgeting came out of communities in Brazil. And this is how this works. And before Dwight was county commissioner and I was county commissioner in Clinton County, I tried to raise the possibility of doing participatory budgeting in Clinton County. And this is how participatory comes together. And they have a deliberative exercise for a bit, and then they select people kind of at random to be on a committee that comes up with the ideas about some options, and then the whole public votes on it. So it's really, you go back to, we did this with the federal budget, and we saw the 916. I don't know that many of us would maybe give quite that much to the military next time. We might put a little more to EPA or maybe to agriculture, or I don't know, but you would get it differently. Plus people then understand when they go through that process a little better about what you have to weigh when trying to even do a budget. And that's an idea that has come from the global South. There's lots of ideas out there. We're not the smartest people just because we think we are. Yeah, please.
The slide where you showed how many Earths resources we would need to keep living the way we're living, and that the US, a lot of the lifestyle is as though there were 4 or 5 Earths. And I think that's a really good way of explaining that. But how do you get down to saying you can't have 2 cars for your family? The Earth can't sustain it. If everybody in India and China and other places had 2 cars per family, I mean, we can't. The Earth can't sustain it. So how do you really get people to take that seriously enough to make that kind of a difference? Or you can't have your thermostat at 72. In the winter, maybe it should be at 67, and maybe in the summer it should be at 80. I mean, how can you get people to really do those kinds of things?
I'll let that off again. All of you, I think we're all trying to figure out those kind of, they're contested areas, and so you know, you have to have some space for the understanding. Should there be a lock set that it always should be like at 72? What if somebody's elderly, or, you know, there's all kinds of things you would figure into to develop a policy that would be fair and appropriate. But I don't know the answer to
I would
exactly.
really demand that everybody had a house, and their house was, you know, fairly well insulated, and that they could afford their house and have enough space for all the things that, and we can't just start with resetting current stuff.
There's a lot of work to be done.
If we knew how to do that, we would have had a different outcome in the election.
There is that.
But communism was invented for. Communism was invented for.
You didn't do a very good job, though.
You know, I don't know if that's what communism was invented for.
Other comments, questions? Yes, back there, and then over here, sorry.
This is a terrible question, I think, but you said how much money the United States makes off of or how much they spend in expenses for the military. Do they make money?
No.
Selling weapons, bombs, and everything that stuff.
Oh, somebody.
The people that manufacture the weapons make lots of money.
About the half that the defense budget goes specifically to contractors. There's a much smaller part that goes to the actual veterans and soldiers. Then there's all the support that goes behind those. But then there's running at the bases. There's all the fossil fuels, the impact, the climate impacts of the military is astronomical. There's a group called Veterans for Peace that has a whole thing on the climate change militarism model. It's constantly trying to raise issues about. Their big push right now is these air shows with the Navy airplanes just doing all this stuff. The amount of energy that's blown out of those jets to do these air shows is phenomenal. And yet, you know.
And what about when bombs are dropped? What, I don't know what kind of CO2 or other things those.
Yeah, I don't know the specifics about the hazards that would depend upon it, but I mean, all you have to do is look at, I was watching 2 nights ago, photos from, on the BBC of, Gaza. And you think of all the energy, all the resources that will go in to having to rebuild it, not just what was already destroyed. But if they're gonna rebuild there in any way, fashion, it's gonna take enormous. That's only one place in the world.
Yeah.
So you're right, it has all these repercussions. Jim, you have a question?
Yeah, so Terry, I always enjoy talking to you about these ideas. I wondered if there's any online class course on sustainability issues that you would recommend, and if not, have you thought of doing one yourself?
Who invited him? No.
Part of our green team.
Yeah.
It is, but.
I think I see, I'm gonna look at. This is some of the voices are here. I think one of my, oh God, I'm seeing some people on here I haven't seen. Oh my goodness gracious. So
there's an Anne who would like to unmute and she wants to make a comment, I believe.
is that Annalise?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Can you hear me? Hi, Terry.
Hi, Annalise.
So I'm talking to you all from the Youghiogheny River watershed south of Pittsburgh. But my link to your group is through TerryLink. When I was a graduate student at Michigan State University 25 years ago, we were on the campus sustainability committee together, and Terry was and is our esteemed leader for all of that. So I'm enjoying hearing his voice and wisdom again, but this piggybacks actually right on the question that was just asked about courses. It's not about sustainability, but I currently work for a group of scientists at NASA who provide free access to all the satellite data that is being collected, and much of that relates to environmental issues such as how to monitor water resources or health and air quality or coastal issues. And so I am going to put a link in the chat. Their trainings are all completely free. They are taught by experts at NASA and other places around the world to help people get access to satellite data to help make resource management decisions. And I just wanted to share that because it sounds like a great group of people there, and this is a free resource that you should all. I just put some examples of some of the recent classes they're having. One is going to come up in December. It's about the blue carbon ecosystems with like mangrove management. But other topics have specifically addressed sustainable development goals and how to use the data. So, but I'm a huge fan of Terry Link. I miss you, Terry.
I paid her $10,000. The check's in the mail, Annalise. Up on the top of the screen, I'm gonna call on another friend I haven't seen in a long time. I know her as Julian Canary, who is running an incredible program out of DC. She's also, she's one of the forerunners of higher education sustainability stuff. Well, I'm gonna let you answer the question that you just heard, if you'd be kind enough to do so, Julian.
That's so nice. Terry, you paid me that 10,000, so thank you. Cause I too, Annalise, you mentioned really enjoying working with Terry, and you remember, Terry, when you co-facilitated the sustainability group at Michigan State, you invited my team at NWF to join you a couple of times. And I've spun off since that role, which was coordinating higher education programs, and started a program called Green Teach for Opportunity. I would in no way say that we're the leader on sustainability programs for education, but that said, we do have job-focused supports related to sustainable development, and a couple of my team members have been here for most of the talk from Negros Occidental, the Philippines, and we represent about 17 countries. So our approach is sustainability, but with a jobs and career path focus. So that's all I'll say, and it's mainly geared towards teachers and faculty.
Thank you, Julian.
Thank you.
Any other questions from there?
Amazing, this talk. Thank you, Terry, as always.
Okay.
Georgina. No, David, I'm sorry.
Oh, do
No,
take first.
no, you go first.
I just want to say thank you for doing this talk, and also to thank everybody who came out, because it would have been really easy to stay home.
Yeah, I almost stayed home.
Yeah. But you know, and it's been a lot of downer stuff that we've heard, and I just want to say that I have a quote taped over my desk, and I'm not going to get it quite right, but I hope that everybody will take this home with them. To be truly radical is to make hope possible rather than despair convincing.
Top that, Dave.
Barry, thanks so much. This is always disturbing and enlivening and so on. The kind of one of the big things I take out of what you've talked about is the need to move from conflict to cooperation so that we get some consensus across the society about the kind of sustainability goals that serve our children's and our grandchildren's interest, as well as the rest of the world. But then I look at this last election, and speaking of conflict, and see how it was fed, by the poverty of so many people. Many of whom, like in the Trump votes, in the hometown I grew up in, now it's a maximum had 30,000 people in 1929, and now they're down to 8 and looking to go down to 6. And their great victory was their mayor about 15 years ago announced that they hadn't had a new job in town for 20 years, but he had got a new industry was coming to town. So he spent $50,000 to fix up an old building for a new company that was coming in to manufacture baseball caps. And he announced, with the $50,000, they would be bringing in at least 40 to 50 jobs for women at $4 an hour. Needless to say, we don't talk about benefits or retirement or anything. And a lot of our society is left behind. We see in this red wave. Many small places in Michigan as well as we see the vote there. So I'm troubled about having seen that conflict that exists between those folks who feel they've been left behind and those of us in these centers of wealth and retirement plans and decent salaries and raises and the like, that they see in some ways as their enemy, with the rich and wealthy ideas as well. So where in Michigan, to be specific, do we start seeking cooperation to get a consensus on sustainable goals for ourselves, our state, our cities, and indeed the world? And that's my puzzle.
Every community has to start it for themselves, I suspect, and somebody has to do it. Somebody has to have the idea. Some woman in our community 35 years ago, Tina Donnelly, had an idea. We needed recycling in our community, and she put a little note in the paper. And anybody interested in this? And 5 or 6 people showed up. Ellen was one of them. And 35 years later, we have a thriving organization because people just connected to that particular idea. And so it's somebody has to have the idea. And I can tell you about all the failures. I told you about the Central Michigan Sustainable Business Forum failure. I sat down and thought about all the ones I started and didn't go anywhere. You'd be there all night. But it does take something to just initiate that, and you never know. This is the concept of I'm learning. I'm a slow learner in biology. I didn't have biology in high school. Somehow I missed it. And even though we understand biology a lot differently now than we did when I was in high school, this idea of emergence in the evolutionary flow of things, even within our bodies, is really impacting me, because you can't see what's underneath there until it actually comes up. And so the best you can actually do is kind of allow that there's a possibility that there's something there, and to do everything you can to nurture that possibility. And maybe it will, and maybe it won't, but that's my 2 cents on. Anybody else want to offer anything?
I can say something for people who are looking for solutions. Like you said, you don't usually see them until they arise. I just completed a program with Next Cycle Michigan, and it's a business accelerator for sustainable businesses. So for people who feel like you don't have hope, if you follow all the teams that are a part of Next Cycle Michigan creating their projects, there's a lot happening that you don't see under the surface, and you should have hope.
And that's happening all over the world, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Paul Hawken did a great book 20 years ago, maybe, called Blessed Unrest, where I think he identified 1 million local nonprofits around the world that just kind of do this stuff. And some of them obviously fail eventually, just like businesses do. Out of every 5 businesses that start this year, 4 of them in 5 years will not be operating anymore. Same thing's true with nonprofits, might be even higher ratio.
Well, I just wanted to say, you and I were both, and others were at the Michigan Climate Summit. It was amazing to see the energy in Ann Arbor just a month ago of all the new ideas and new organizations being created right in the state, of mostly young people doing amazing things.
Yeah, there is hope out there in these darkest days. Becky.
I just wanted to say, as we look at all these charts or graphs going up, 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 they are going down, but with growth and new people and new needs, it pushes it back up. So the ideas aren't just failing to happen, they are happening. And we're probably preventing it from going even higher if you've done nothing. So there are some successes out there. We need to get a lot more to go down, but population, I think, is stopping, at least in this country. The birth rates are going down. So there's some hope.
Indeed. John or Robert, do you want to wrap this up, or Denise? You want to?
No. You're the wrapper. You're the wrapper-upper.
I had my hand up like halfway up, like 12 times, and so I do want to say.
Oh, okay, good. Sorry. It's the wall. It's the wall, Robert. All you against the back wall. I just really couldn't see.
No. I was hesitant, but so I work in the education sector, and I see Lots of bright students. But I do international education, I've been in India, I've been in China. Everybody knows what the sustainable development goals are. Ask our students what the SDGs are, they have no idea, okay? And I think that part of this starts at home, and when required courses in entrepreneurship are required for graduation, but none in environmental science or anything like that, I think that's a place we need to start, because I think that we have an unlimited potential of ideas from young people. They're not being tapped because they're not being exposed early enough to understanding a lot of things that your talk spoke to today. So, that would be my 2 cents, but, from the back room, I just wanted to give Terry, I want to ask one thing. How many of you have never seen Terry Link in your life before tonight? Okay, all right, feeling good about that, okay,
Don't ask the follow-up
I
question.
agree with the online course, I think you should do that, there's so much here. And, it needs to be amplified, right, so, and I think you did a great job of doing that, even for someone who has very little, science background and so on, everything was definitely reachable for me. So I want to thank Terry. Let's give him a round of applause. You understand about ideas, it's about action as well, okay? And so I think as we think about leaving this room today, a lot of ideas that you talked about must result in some action, even small ones by us, and that's where it starts. So thank you again, Terry, for coming. And what is our next program? We will have the human rights day in December, right? So I think that'll be able to for your stuff. And if you're interested in joining our group, I can talk to you afterwards. So thank you, Terry, very much. And for all our online, the tens of thousands of people online. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Okay. Yeah, I think that's the Terry Link Fan Club.
My
Thank
wallet's
you.
empty, so
I'm your partner, Terry.
Bye, everybody.
Fan Club, too. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Did you get that recorded okay?